I am careful not to confuse excellence with perfection. Excellence I can reach for. Perfection is God's business. Michael J. Fox. This is Deep Dive Creatives, a podcast that explores creativity. Show your love by hitting that subscribe or follow button and leave a thought or two in the comment section. Meet Chuck Neighbors.
Where is this coming from? Why am I getting this reoccurring vision, if you will, to do this? And I argued with God. I did not want to do this.
Chuck Neighbors began his career as a professional actor, director, storyteller, and writer in 1974. He toured his one-man shows throughout North America, as well as 17 countries around the world. Chuck performed before hundreds of live audiences. His show, In His Steps, was featured both in radio and television. Chuck has performed in theaters, churches, gymnasiums, airplane hangars, and even on board a submarine. He traveled by planes, trains, automobiles, boats, and even by helicopter to mountaintops in South Korea, performing for U.S. military troops. Chuck's journey in discovering his creative abilities was really through the process of elimination.
I was one of those kids that growing up in the church and in school, I struggled to find my place to fit in. I was never going to be a sports star. I wasn't good at athletics. I wasn't a brain, so I was not going to excel at academics. But I discovered that I liked acting and I liked music. I was into the arts. And my earliest memories of entertaining myself was always playing games, pretending.
When Chuck got to high school, like many young adults, he felt compelled to explore what he was going to do with his life.
I need to figure out what I'm going to do with my life. I was going through that journey, and I discovered forensics, which was competitive speaking, and I auditioned and was assigned the role of humorous interp. It was my category. And I did a reading of No Time for Sergeants, and I competed with that, and I took, my very first year at it, took second place in state honors in that category.
That success gave Chuck the inspiration to pursue acting, and quickly learned he had a great deal of aptitude in that discipline, and achieved a good deal of success.
Right out of the gate, got cast in lead roles and such plays as Guys and Dolls and Count Dracula. I played Dracula. So I began to realize, okay, now this is something that I really enjoy doing.
Chuck also pursued his love for music, both singing in school and church choirs and playing drums in orchestras, marching bands, and a couple of rock bands along the way. Growing up in the church, Chuck felt like he was being called to some type of ministry, but didn't exactly know what that was supposed to look like.
I went as a theater major to a college in Tennessee, Carson Newman, which was affiliated with the denomination of the Southern Baptists, which is what my upbringing was. So I went there as a theater major, began to quickly discover right away that theater major was kind of one of those terms that was loosely going to be part of the English department. And if I followed that track, I was going to end up being a teacher. Nothing against being a teacher, but I didn't feel like that was my calling. And I got my first professional acting job between my freshman and sophomore years in college in the Smoky Mountain Passion Play, which is outdoor drama, which was big in that part of the country. There was Under These Hills, which was a big outdoor drama in North Carolina, and in where I was going in Tennessee, which close to the Smoky Mountains. There was the Smoky Mountain Passion Play, which was the life of Christ. Interesting. First professional acting job was a faith-based production. And the director of our college theater program was the director of the Smoky Mountain Passion Play that particular year. And my job was assistant to the director and understudy for all male roles. So during the course of one summer, I played everybody from just a nobody in the crowd to Judas to Jesus, all in one summer. And I discovered that I actually had the best job of the whole cast because I got all of the variety, all of these different characters that I was able to play, and had a blast doing that. I had deals going with some of the other actors. They would come up to me and say, I'm going to be sick next Friday, so you might want to bone up on my role, you know.
It was at that same time that an internationally acclaimed gospel group called the Spurlows performed at the college Chuck was attending. They were always looking to recruit new talent and would often hold auditions wherever they performed. However, Chuck wasn't quite up to putting his talents on display at an audition.
Well, I was a coward. So I didn't do that, but I went home and I did a cassette tape, and I sang on one side, and then I played drums on the other side, and I sent that off to the Spurlows just to kind of think, oh, well, whatever. So fast forward then, after college, or during college, and while I was at the Smoky Mountain Passion Play, I met an actor who was once a part of a Christian theater company, which was a totally new concept to me. There's a Christian theater company, a company called the Covenant Players. And so I investigated this group, and I ended up, like, wow, this is just too good to be true, because this is what I was looking for. Something that uses the arts and also is a ministry. That's a dream come true. So I ended up dropping out of college and going off to join the Covenant Players out of Southern California. And ended up, when I joined, that you had to make like a 2-year commitment. So I decided I would do that for the next 2 years. Between tours, I got a call from a man named Larnell Harris. You may know that name, contemporary of Sandy Patty and Steve Green. Well, Larnell Harris was the drummer for the Spurlows that I had seen at my college. And at that time, he was more known as a drummer than a singer. And Larnell had gotten my tape, and he wanted me to be a drummer for one of the Spurlows groups. They had more than one touring group. And so here I was at this fork in the road. I had just signed an agreement to travel with the theater company, and I get this call from Larnell Harris to become a drummer for the Spurlows, and it's like, what am I going to do? Well, because I had made the commitment to the theater company, I chose to stay with the theater company and turned my back on that. But that's one of those forks in the road where I still to this day daydream about what would have happened if I had become a drummer for the Spurlows instead of an actor with the Covenant Players.
For almost 10 years, Chuck continued performing with the Covenant Players. And during that time, he met his wife, Lori, and was married and began thinking about having children and raising a family. But doing so while traveling with this acting group didn't seem like the ideal situation to Chuck or his wife.
So I was at this place where I kind of said, well, God, what now? I mean, here, I feel like you called me to this, and I think I kind of found my calling. And I was I'm still in the Covenant Players at that point, but not really sure what I was going to do. And call it a vision, call it something I ate for dinner that didn't agree with me or whatever, but I had a number of sleepless nights where I felt very specifically that God was calling me to take the book In His Steps, a novel that was written by Charles Sheldon 100 years ago, and do it as a one-man show. And the idea of a one-man show was not on my mind. I love doing theater and community, collaborative, and all that sort of thing. So I had no desire to do a one-man show. I hadn't even recently read the book. It was something I read a long time ago. So where is this coming from? Why am I getting this reoccurring vision, if you will, to do this? And I argued with God. I did not want to do this. That was not what that was not how I was wired. And I kind of, through the process, I kind of said, well, God, if this is really what you want me to do, I'll try. I don't know. And I had no idea where to begin. So I sat down with the book, and I read the book over a couple of different times, and I thought, well, I got to find somebody to write this script. I don't know I'm not a writer. I don't know what to do with this. And I actually interviewed a couple of different people and basically the response I got back, hey man, this is your vision, not my vision. And so finally when I realized, I guess I've got to write this, I sat down with the book, And I began to kind of say, oh, okay, I can kind of see how this would work, and I could see how this section, I mean, obviously I'm not going to recite the entire novel, but I began. And about that same time, I was looking for role models, I guess, other people who did one-man shows, and I happened to see Henry Fonda do Clarence Darrow. He did a one-man show of Clarence Darrow. And I was watching him do that, all of a sudden light bulbs were going off all over the place. I know how to do this now. I see how he handles dialogue. I see how he sets this up on the stage, how he uses the stage for different places in the story. And
Nice. Yeah.
all of a sudden I began to see how I could turn this book into a one-man show. So I began writing and crafting the show, and I did a couple of test performances just for small groups of people, and realized this is going to work. This could really work.
And in 1984, Chuck ended his tenure with the Covenant Players and did his first performance of In His Steps. Chuck performed this one-man show at church services, outreach events, dinner theaters, retreats, and conferences. However, having performed a variety of plays in the past, Chuck was beginning to wonder.
Okay, God, I'm doing In His Steps, but is this it? Now I do In His Steps for the rest of my life? How about you wake me up with another idea for another show now? And I got the very distinct message that felt God was saying, I showed you what you can do through me. Now get to work.
Okay.
And so that's when I began to realize, I guess I have to become a creator. I have to create things. And so I began, that was the turning point when up to that point, I didn't really think of myself as an artist. I didn't really think of myself as a creative. I just thought of myself as an actor, and I know how to do this thing. It was more of a discipline that I learned to do. Not that there wasn't creative things that I was doing, but to create from scratch, from the ground up, or to take something and create something out of it, that was a turning point for me. That's when I realized, I guess I'm a creative, I guess I'm an artist, and began to apply those labels. And so I then turned that into a career, and I traveled doing one-man shows for over 35 years, 10 years with Covenant Players and 35 years doing one-man shows.
In August of 2019, Chuck did his last theatrical performance of one of his one-man shows, thinking he was going to take a bit of a sabbatical from acting. However, when COVID hit and everything shut down, Chuck took that as a sign to permanently retire his acting career and pursue other creative outlets.
I started writing books. I'd written previously a number of scripts and things like that had been published. But I had grandkids now that were in my life, and I decided to write some children's books for the grandchildren. So every grandchild that came along, I've written a children's book for them. And I have one that's on my to-do list now because we just had grandchild number 5.
Currently, Chuck is investing his creative energies into a 3-man Americana band called Blacksmith Neighbors.
We get a lot of comments on our name. What we did is we've taken the names of the 3 people in the band, who are Bob Black, Jeff Smith, and Chuck Neighbors. We put our last names together, Blacksmith Neighbors.
Right.
But a lot of people, well, who's the blacksmith? Is there a blacksmith up there? You know, try to figure out the name that way. But it just kind of worked for us. Bob and Jeff and I went to the same church for a number of years, and they played worship music and other things. But I saw a video of Bob at a local winery playing his guitar and singing. And I've been a drummer for all my life, but I no longer had a set of drums because my kids also got into music, and my last set of drums got destroyed by one of my sons, and I've never seen it again. But I bought a cajon, which is a box drum, and so I reached out to Bob and said, hey, I saw you playing at the winery. I said, I got a cajon. I said, if you ever want somebody to come and sit in with you, I'd be happy to do that. And he had already been talking to Jeff Smith, who plays bass, about getting together and doing some music. So during COVID, we started rehearsing, and we kept putting together tunes. And so now almost every weekend we play somewhere.
As Chuck unpacks his thoughts about creativity, I hope his dedication to the creative process will inspire you to continue your own adventurous journey down the wild path of creativity. Let's dive in.
So how do you define creativity?
Creativity for me, I take it back to the story that I shared about when I created In His Steps.
Okay.
It was, to me, I can't separate, first of all, my calling, God speaking to me, that process of the creativity I feel is something that He gave to me. I think He gives it to all of us in some measure, but that was a specific gift that He gave to me. But creativity for me is, I have to kind of relate it first and foremost to the theater process, and that is dealing with the what if.
Okay.
The what if is what drives my creativity. I've written a number of plays over the years for church, because there was a segment of time, just like drums in church, there was a segment of time when theater was not looked upon kindly in the church. And that all changed with the evolution of Willow Creek Community Church, a big church that started this whole movement of worship dramas, plays that helped to set up the sermon.
Yeah.
And I've written a number of those, and so many of those start with the what if kind of a question. The purpose of those dramas was to raise a question, to raise an issue that the pastor would then address in a sermon. So I've spent a lot of time at night and in the shower where I would just kind of say, what if, and then kind of fill in the blank. What if we had a husband and a wife who were having a discussion about their devotional life, and kind of let it go from there. And then I've spent a lot of time learning about improv and doing improv. And one of the things that drives improv is the question, yes and.
Yes.
Yes and. And so I'm not trained as a writer. I didn't study writing. It's kind of instinctual, because I've spent so much time on stage in my life that I kind of know how story works. And so you have a beginning, a middle, and end. You have conflict, you have resolution. And so my creative process is basically to improv on paper.
Okay.
So I would get a seed of an idea, and I might have an inkling of an outline, but often I wouldn't even know where it's going to end.
Right.
I would just know that I want to deal with a certain question, and I would just kind of create characters on paper and just kind of what if my way through it, and yes and my way through it. And so many times those would work. Not always, but they would often result in a script.
Yeah.
Even the one-man shows that I created after In His Steps were kind of like a what if kind of scenarios. I would kind of say, what if, one example would be, what if we got to see what Judas went through after the betrayal? I mean, that window between the betrayal and when he kills himself. And so I kind of what if'd it. And it takes some research, a little bit of, fleshing out what does the Bible tell us? What do we know about Judas during that time? But then the rest of it is all purely my imagination and kind of putting myself into those shoes and what if and yes anding my way through it and creating a script that way. So that's a lot of how I have created the things that I've written. Even when I'm moving from out of that into the children's books that I've written, it's kind of improvisational in that sense too. It's like, okay, I have a seed idea of what I want this story to be about. In the case of one of my grandkids, his name is Miles. We had the hardest time getting him to smile. And so that was the story. Miles would not smile. And so it's just a matter of what if, and showing these different scenarios where everybody's trying to get Miles to smile, and then he doesn't smile until at the very end, and then he farts during a meal when the whole family's gathered around, and then smiles, and then finally Miles smiled. But it's just real simple stuff like that.
Right. Do you have like a favorite part of that process?
The favorite part is always, and I think any artist is lying if they deny this, is the completion and getting the applause, if you will, the fact that people liked it, that you hit a note that a note literally, but not figuratively. You hit a note that they liked, that they resounded with, that was pleasing to them.
Yeah.
The well done, the applause. Yeah. Those are the things that I think. I don't believe in the adage that I hear a lot: art for art's sake. Yeah, to a certain degree, sure. Would I create if nobody was going to appreciate what I created? Probably not. If I'm being honest, and I don't think any artist really does. I mean, I've had artists say, "I just do this just for my own enjoyment. I don't care if anybody likes it." I frankly reject that. I don't think that that's true. When I create something, whether it's something I've written, a play, or anything that I've created through the years, one of the books that I've written, my very first thing is I want to get my wife's reaction. I want her to read it, and I want her to say, well done. I want her to say that she liked it.
Yeah.
And when I perform a piece for the first time, I'm living for people to say, that was good, that was great, I enjoyed it, or that meant something to me, that touched me,
Yeah.
So that's the payoff.
Is there a place you go to get inspired when you're facing a creative challenge?
It's going to break down into different categories.
Sure, yeah.
But when it comes to writing a piece of theater or a play or something, I tend to go towards life experience.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to write about some kind of conflict, it's got to feel real. So I'm going to look at my own life. I'm going to.
Okay.
I may disguise it if I'm going to put it on the page.
Yeah.
But a lot of the conversations, if you looked at the history of all of the short sketches that I've written, which there are probably well over 100 that I've written over the years, in almost every single one of them, there's going to be a mirror that reflects a little bit of what I went through, because that's what, and I know that that's true then, because it's a common thing for all families. You listen to comedians, the best comedians for me that I like are those that tell stories that people say, yeah, that's my life. I was just watching Ray Romano on a show the other night, and he was talking about the process of Everybody Loves Raymond and why do people like it so much. He says, because everybody says, that's my dad, that's my mom, that's my brother, that's my kids.
Okay.
And those are the things that give me inspiration. Some of the later things that I've written in my one-man show categories, the last two shows that I put together were my own personal stories, rather than I actually went and I created one's called Go Ask Your Mother, a father's story, and it's about parenting.
Yeah.
And I took the real stories of raising my kids, and it was very vulnerable. Some of them are very raw, emotional stories. They don't always reflect well on me, but telling those stories, obviously embellishing to make it work for the stage, but certainly telling those true stories. And one of the things that has changed for theater in the church, I think, is it went from these productions of these little sketches, and they began to gradually drop the word drama, drop the word theater, embrace the word story and storytelling.
Okay.
And so the whole idea of a slice of life, a little bit of my story, with the hope that you realize as I'm telling you my story, you're connecting with your own story, and that's where the communication takes place. So my inspiration for so many things that I've written is a slice of life. It's what I went through, what I have observed in my own character.
Are there people that you get inspiration? Are there like drummers that inspire you and actors that inspire you?
Yeah, there
writers?
are, for certainly. Drummer-wise, one of my best inspirations is my high school drummer friend. His name is Bob Battersby, and he's a drummer in Florida now. We both grew up in Michigan, but he pursued music as a career, got a music degree, ran a music store, has played in numerous bands, and he's always been a phenomenal drummer to me. And as a kid, what inspired me most about him, he was an excellent drummer, but was his persona when he played the drums.
Oh, okay.
I see so many drummers who are just concentrating and they're frowning when they're playing. He had fun. He looked like he was effortless, and he smiled and he made faces when he played the drums. And I always felt like I want to play drums like him. And it wasn't his skill, although that was great, but it was the fact that he looked like he was having so much fun. And today when I watch bands and stuff, the drummers that look like it's effortless and they're having fun are the ones that inspire me.
Okay.
I'll mention too, when I wrote in his steps, I watched the Clarence Darrow with Henry Fonda performing. Right. And just watching an actor who really owns the stage and knows what they're doing and is comfortable and confident, those are the actors that inspire me. So there's been classics through the years, a lot of movie actors and stuff, and there's personal actors that I've known, friends of mine, in Covenant Players, who I look up to. One would be an actor named Peter Iverson, who was one of the best actors, I think, in Covenant Players, and I watch him on stage, and again, it's that confidence,
okay,
and that the fact that he owned the stage when he was on it, you were drawn to him. Those are the kind of people that inspire me to also want to do that.
Is there things that you can pass on to other creatives to say, here's a little trick I've learned to overcome the dry spell or the lack of inspiration? Is there trade secrets?
Trade secrets, yeah. Well, there's a difference. I will say that there's a difference between writing something that I'm inspired to write, like in his steps and some of the other things that I've made my living doing, and the feeling like I've got a deadline. I'm writing a collection of plays that's going to be published. I've got 3 or 4 good ones in here, but I'm not so sure about these others, and I need to come up with some more.
Right.
And I think it's something you can force, but I will be the first to admit that I've published some very mediocre stuff to kind of fill in the pages.
Yeah.
But I think that's where the discipline comes in. So even if I'm looking at a blank page, I'll start with something. Again, it's like improvisation. If I can just grab that what if and see where it leads. And it may end up being in the garbage can. Mm-hmm. Some of the disappointments in my career creatively, honestly, are more the collaborative things than they are the one-man show things that I've done. Mm-hmm. Because I've worked for a church as an artist in residence and tried to help them with creative projects. And some of those worked out really well. Others, I kind of felt like, man, there's a lot of hoops to go through just to get a thumbs up on this project.
Yeah. So
many people have to read it and sign off on it. And I think it's a really good idea. I think it nails it, but for whatever reason, they vetoed it. Those are the disappointments. But I can kind of say, oh, well, shrug those off and move on, you know.
Yeah.
But I don't try to beat it, beat a dead horse, so to speak, you know. It's like, This is going nowhere. I need to realize it's going nowhere and walk away.
Yeah. When something is not working out, how do you address that?
I need a sounding board, usually.
Okay.
Like I might think this is a good idea, but I'll have my wife Lori read it and see what she thinks. There's a couple of other artists that I've worked closely with over the years that I'll have them read it and see what they think. And people that I trust to be honest with me and not just say, well, we want to say good things to you because who you are or whatever.
Right.
And trusting some of theirs. I mean, a lot of the children's stories I've written are rhyme. You know, they're books in rhyme. And I come up with a scheme. I think, hey, this is pretty good. It's not working quite as well. And I'll have my wife read it, and she'll say, well, why don't you change this word to this word and blah, 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 you know, and being able to take that kind of input from somebody else. Don't be so full of yourself that you think that you write, you know, finished copy every time, you know, that it can't be revised and rewritten and so being able to take that kind of criticism and critique helps.
What motivates you to keep creating?
There's different areas. One would be deadlines. You know,
Okay.
we've got a deadline to meet. Like my to-do list these days, since I've retired in a sense, is very short. So I don't have the deadlines like I used to have. But deadlines, having somebody kind of hold the gun to your head, say, you know, this has got to be done by this particular date.
Yeah.
It kind of forces you to do that.
Your grandchild, before they're in their 20s, you want to get that story out, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, yeah, I kind of stalled, like the newest grandchild is just a few months old, and I'm kind of waiting to see a little bit of personality before I write, because I kind of want it to be relatable to, you know, so when they read it, one day they'll say, oh yeah, this is what I was like, you know.
Okay. So you got a little bit of a leeway there.
Yeah, and I think some of it is I think for myself, I've discovered back to the idea of when did I discover I was creative? Now that I know that I am one, I've also discovered that I'm not very content for a long period of time with nothing creatively going on.
Okay, interesting. Yeah.
Like I've written a couple of songs, and those songs kind of come to me when my head hits the pillow at night, and all of a sudden, hey, well, what if?
Yeah.
And I kind of take a song, and sometimes they don't work out. One song has morphed, and it still is not anywhere near close to being something that we would want to perform. But I wrote a song, and it was really stuff that was on my mind that I wanted to say. But after writing it, I realized that's not a good song, because it's too preachy, and it's too, you know, it's not gonna go over well. And so we've done several different renditions of that, and it's still nowhere. And sometimes you just gotta let those things go. But other times you get a flash of inspiration, and it ends up being like one song that I wrote that we were not performing it as a band, but I just wrote it just for my own satisfaction. And it's just one of those things that not only did I have the words, but I had the tune in my head.
Okay.
And so figuring out how to put that together. So I actually did something which a lot of artists frown on, but I used AI. I wrote the lyrics, and I kind of knew how I wanted it to sound, and I took it to the band, and we couldn't quite get it to work out the way we wanted. And so I put the lyrics into AI, and I was shocked. Like the AI kicked out several different versions of the song, but the very first version was like, that's what was in my head. That's almost exactly right.
That's scary.
But now, because it's AI, it's like, well, we can't do that song because it's AI. So.
Do you have a philosophy that governs your creativity?
I don't know about a philosophy per se. My answer to that is probably a little bit more in terms of calling.
Okay.
And I heard this bit of advice. I don't even remember who told it to me, and it's been floating around. It's not an original idea by any means, but the idea that don't do it unless you're called.
Okay.
But if you're called, do it no matter what.
Any final thoughts about creativity?
Well, I don't know if I have anything that's really unique or anything to say. I mean, obviously, the fact that if you're called, like I had mentioned before, if you're called to do it, then by all means do it. And it also, for me, it needs to be fun. It needs to be something that you get enjoyment from. If you find that your creativity is no longer something you enjoy doing, then maybe you should stop. But if if it gives you pleasure, if it's even if it is just for your personal satisfaction, even though I said earlier that everybody wants people to appreciate the art that they create, but if you're not going to be a happy person unless you're creative, then create.
I like it.